All right, Ray, I think we're doing decently well on time. So I'm going to bring Ray Hagerman to the stage now. Ray is going to talk about efforts that are going on in Madisonville, Hopkins County related to entrepreneurial endeavors. So Ray, take the stage. Thank you, sir.
Okay, I think Earl's out there rounding up the last stragglers in the back. And again, thank you for voting for me for presenter of the day, and I appreciate that. No, thanks again for having us in here today. I will tell you as we're getting started, I am definitely not, I'm not Chris Wooldridge, I'm certainly not Beth Land, and I'm not John Bevington, but I did stay at the Holiday Inn Express here in Danville, and I enjoyed it. It was a great experience. Thank you. No, I think what you're going to hear from me is sort of the next iteration of the things that Chris was saying and even some of the things that Beth was saying. Chris gave you a really good overview as to what the future holds and how things are changing. But one of the things I wanted to bring to bear is that it does take a balanced approach in economic development. For one thing, I do want to support a couple of facts that I took from the takeaways of what Chris and Beth both said. Chris talked about regionalism, and it was mentioned about the announcement that was made in Henderson here about a month ago, and $400 million and 320 jobs. Because we're only 40 miles away from Henderson, number one, because of the attributes of that particular deal, we were never in the running anyway, but we don't see each other as competitors anyway. But with those 320 jobs, when those come online in the next few years, guaranteed 50 or 60 of those people will come from my county. Great, we all won. So that's what regionalism is about. They win, we win. We win, they win. So we're all part of the same team sport here. The other thing that I thought was very interesting, if you listen to some of the data points of Beth's presentation, and that was that the deals that they work on now, the jobs used to be this amount of jobs and this amount of investment, and now they're this amount of investment and this amount of jobs. When I saw the one on there where they were talking about the Japanese company that invested $127 million for 80 jobs. Okay, 80 good jobs, that's wonderful, that's good, but that's 80 jobs. 20 years ago, that might have been 1,500 jobs. We just made an announcement about 3 months ago in Madisonville, Ahlstrom-Munksjö, which is a Finnish company that already has a presence in our community and has already invested about $120 million and already has about 160 employees, is going to add a $70 million investment for 51 jobs. And we're excited about that because they are high-paying, technical type jobs that are in the manufacturing sector in a state-of-the-art plant, but nonetheless it's 51 jobs. But that now brings their total investment to $200 million in our community. I don't think they're leaving anytime soon. So that's one of the things you have to bear in mind. The other thing I was going to say is what you see on my presentation, which I've titled The Value of Building an Entrepreneurial Ecosystem in a Rural Community. I love the baseball analogies that Beth was using and John was using. This time of the year, we're starting to get in the baseball playoff seasons here before long. Hope your team's doing well. Mine is the Braves, but hope they're doing well. Yeah, see, I've got one kindred spirit here. But what you see in a successful baseball team is not unlike what you see in successful communities, and that is you've got to have a balance. Okay, so there's the power hitting that happens, and we spoke a lot about the power hitting. In my mind, what Beth is talking to you guys about, making investments for the future, spending money for things that are going to drive your employment in the future, That's one thing. That's the power hitting. We got to have that or we're not going to be successful. But we've also got to play small ball. And what I want to talk to you a little bit about in the next few minutes is about how we play small ball in Madisonville and Hopkins County. Do we turn our backs completely on power hitting? Absolutely not. Over the past 5 years, we've probably had $200 million worth of investment in our community. We've had at least 100 job, $10 million announcement in each of the last 5 years. Some of them didn't even want state incentives. Didn't hit headlines as much, but you know what? If they don't want incentives, guess what? We get to keep that money. But as a result, we've got 4 employers in our community that in the last 3 years have literally grown 1,000 jobs in our community. From a regionalism standpoint too, one of those employers has now 1,000 people at its distribution facility. You might have heard of them. If you've got any workwear or any casual kind of clothing, Carhartt makes it, and they have their distribution center in our community. 1,000 people work at that specific location. Half of them are from an adjoining county. Those people, every day, they drive to work to Hopkins County, they get in their cars and they drive home. Do I care? Yes, I wish they lived in Hopkins County so they'd spend more of their paycheck there, but I'm glad to have them, and that's what makes us part of a region. So don't want to denigate anything that anybody has said about any of the power hitting, but I want to talk to you a little bit about playing small ball. So why should you even care about this? So I look back, the past 2 years, we've had, through our entrepreneurial development program, we've had 19 business starts. Those are the ones we could identify. I think we probably have more than that, but these are ones that we could identify and put our finger on and say, yeah, they're still functioning, they're still hitting it, they're still created a job from it. But that happened in the last 2 years. We have literally visited in the last 2 years 130 meetings with entrepreneurs. That might be somebody that's just thinking about starting a business in the community, or somebody who maybe already has what amounts to a fledgling business, but we're just able to help them a little bit and add some resources to it and add some expertise to it. But why do I think this is important? Why should you think it's important? Number one, the past 5 years we've been looking over 19 in the last 2 years, but the last 5 years we've created 58 new businesses in Hopkins County. Many of them employ at least 3 people. In fact, I did not specifically look at the demographics of the Danville-Boyle County area, but 65% of the businesses in Hopkins County employ less than 5 people. So we're a small business community. Yeah, we have some power hitters, but we're a small business community. And that's where we derive our economic engine. So those 58 new business starts in the last 5 years created roughly 175 jobs. That's 35 jobs a year. Remember Beth's slide where she said that deals that they're looking at these days go down to about 40 jobs? So don't neglect working on those initiatives that Beth was talking about, but also don't, as the Bible says, neglect the day of small things. So here we have 35 new jobs that are getting created every year in Hopkins County because we put a decent, I think very good entrepreneurial development program together. And guess what? With entrepreneurial development, you're not giving up any incentives. You're really not. Other than I have a full-time person that works on my staff that helps entrepreneurs, and I do too, but that person's sole job is to help entrepreneurs. That's our only investment in those folks. Now, do they qualify for a few state incentives here and there? Yes, they do, but nothing appreciable. So this is something that we can do. This is something that any community can do. The good news about entrepreneurs is they're homegrown. They started out in your community. They're here because they want to be. They grow their business in your community, and they stay in your community. And I'm not even talking about, sometimes when people say, oh yeah, you're touting the thing about entrepreneurial development, that's all well and good, that's whatever. You're talking about the food trucks, you're talking about people that open a restaurant, you're talking about people that do a home-based business or something like that. Yeah, I'm talking about those people. But I'm also talking about the 2 guys that got laid off from the coal mining industry that are really good with their hands, and they started a fabrication shop 5 years ago, and now they got 25 people working for them. So we're talking about all of the above. We're not just talking about some of those. And do you recall the slide that Chris showed that had the beautiful people on it? The Millennials, right? It had Chip and Joanna Gaines, and it had the kids from Laurel, Mississippi, and their kids, and the 2 other folks from Mississippi. Those are the entrepreneurs we're talking about. They're the ones who have money, they spend money, they start interesting businesses, whether it's a brewery, whether it's a marketing firm, whether it's a technology-based firm, any of those things, they can start in your community. If you've got internet service, they can start in your community. So those are the kinds of people I'm talking about. And they live where they live. Is there a real reason? I've been to Waco 3 times. I've been to the silos 3 times. When I first went to the silos the very first time and saw what they were doing there, it was great. But you drove the perimeter, this is probably 5 years ago, you drove the perimeter of Waco downtown, and I'm like, really? This is a bright spot and a really kind of interesting picture. But you know what? Fast forward until last fall, went there again, and you know what? New entrepreneurial activities happening in downtown Waco, a good 4 or 5 blocks from the silos. You know, having 1,000 people a day go through your facility will do that kind of thing. So again, this is not something that you just neglect. This is something that you empower. These are folks that you help be successful. And last but not least, it's a very, very cost-effective way of creating jobs. As I said before, all I've got is 1 staff member that we pay every year, right? Or, well, actually, she gets paid every 2 weeks. But that we do this year in, year out. This is our only expense, really, to help empower our entrepreneurial development program. And as a result, we get the jobs. So just kind of a community overview, just tell you a little bit about Madisonville and Hopkins County. Population about almost 19,000 people in a county of about 45,000 people. Interesting thing about Madisonville is, as far as jobs, people that are actually employed in Madisonville, about 15,000 of the workforce. So our labor force is about 8,500 people, and we have 15,000 jobs. That's kind of probably not unlike you guys, a little bit. Hopkins County, it gets a little bit better. We have slightly more jobs than we do labor force in that 18 to 64 realm for the labor force. Okay, we have a plethora of jobs right now, probably 1,000 jobs that are going unfilled right now. But at the same point in time, there's a lot of people in your community that want to start their own business. They have challenges for other reasons. They may have childcare challenges. They may have a myriad of different things that cause them to just want to be an entrepreneur. So you got to help those people do those things as well. But just kind of gives you insight into who we are and that we're not a big community. I had somebody tell me one time that entrepreneurial stuff, all that, accelerators, having co-working spaces, all that stuff, that's for big cities. Well, it is. But I don't know about you guys, but probably anecdotally in the last year, especially since the COVID shutdown and then the coming out of it, I bet you we've had 30 people move to Madisonville, Kentucky that had no other reason to be there other than they lived in a big city somewhere else, ostensibly the coasts, and they just put their finger on the map and said, you know what, I think Kentucky's a nice state, and this looks like a nice area to be. And I ship stuff, I have a little sideline business. I ship things, and from right there in Madisonville, Kentucky, I can ship things anywhere about the country in 2 days. So that's a pretty good place. I look at the real estate market. Oh, wow, that's cheap compared to wherever. So they moved here. Didn't have any reason to do it, but they did it. I'm sure the same is happening right here. And so we in Kentucky have this opportunity to do this sort of thing at almost any size community. So just pay attention to that. But the next thing I wanted to talk about is really, okay, that's all well and good, Ray. You've cheerleaded that a little bit. You've maybe overemphasized it a little bit. But how do we get there if we really want to be there? So I have kind of a formula I use as a path to create a successful entrepreneurial program. Number one, it starts with culture. You have to create a culture of entrepreneurship. So in other words, about 5 years ago, maybe 6, it predated me for about a year, they started having meetings every week. We translated that into every month, but having meetings every week, entrepreneurs that get together. It was a program called 1 Million Cups from the Kauffman Foundation in Kansas City. Turns out after a while, because of our size, we didn't really hit that profile because, quite frankly, in a community our size, if you're trying to have a brand new entrepreneur that's never spoken before, you get about 3 years into it, you've exhausted a lot of the people that can give their testimonies and whatever if you're doing it every week. So we asked them if we could do it every month, and they said yes for a year, and then at that second year they go, nah, we want to go back to our original profile. We said, okay, fine, we'll start our own. So we have something we call Innovate and Caffeinate, and the first Wednesday of every month, everybody shows up at 7:30 in the morning. We've got 25 or 30 people that religiously come to this, and they just love to talk to each other and inspire each other and help talk about all things entrepreneur. And we're there to inspire them. We're there to support them. We're not there to sell stuff. We're there to talk about entrepreneurship. And so far, it's been very successful. We even did it online on Facebook Lives when COVID was going on. And we actually helped spread it to Murray, where Chris Wooldridge is from. So Murray has an Innovate and Caffeinate, and we're working on trying to have those in other communities as well. It's just starting. It's just culture. It's just people getting together. And the other thing that's important to know about an entrepreneurial culture is it's okay to fail. You can start something, and hopefully you didn't spend all your money, but you can start it. You didn't be successful, but you learned something. You can put it back into work for something else that maybe you want to do. And here's another thing that's interesting about entrepreneurs too. Failed entrepreneurs make really great employees. Why is that? Because they start thinking like owners. They walk into even if they're working in an industrial plant, they walk in there and they go, well, this workflow's kind of screwed up. Look at that guy standing over there. This guy's working his tail off, and this guy's just standing around over here. An entrepreneur who's been there, done that, and been responsible for a payroll can see those kinds of things. And so I submit to you that even a failed entrepreneur helps your community because he makes a better employee. The second thing we focused on is you create that culture, now you start talking about talent. And this is where you get to know your community really well. You get to know people that do things really well. Maybe they're not entrepreneurs right now, but you can tap them on the shoulder, and you've seen them and you've observed them, and you've got a big enough core group of people that you can say, hey, what do you think about John Bevington? You know, I've noticed he's really good at this and this and this, and I know he's getting kind of tired of his job at KU. Not really. But he's really always wanted to do something. So go tap him on the shoulder and say, hey, have you ever thought about doing this? You know, you're really good at this. We love these products that you make. What do you think about this? So you start doing some of your own internal recruiting in your community for people that you think would be good entrepreneurs. And that word travels. Then you start having people come to your community because you've got a good entrepreneurial environment, particularly if you're starting to lean over into some tech type enabled companies. It might be something that's purely technical. Maybe they're website developers. Maybe they're cybersecurity experts. Maybe they're just really good at helping industrial companies handle their IT problems. You know, all of the above are good targets for you to try to recruit to your company or to your community to create that talent pool of people. They may or may not become entrepreneurs long term, but they're good talent and you want to have them in your community. The third thing is you've got to have spaces. You got to have some place for these entrepreneurs to get together and collide. I call it collisions, right? So we talked about culture, we talked about talent. Now we're trying to make all of those people collide. Where are they going to collide? So what we chose to do is create some co-working space. I was smart enough to know, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but I was smart enough to know we probably didn't have enough people that are going to be tech entrepreneurs. We probably didn't have enough people that needed accelerator services and all that kind of stuff in and of themselves, but I bet we've got some of those people. I bet we've got some remote workers / co-workers that if we combine those people in our community and we took our old passenger train station that hadn't seen a passenger train come through there since 1973, I think it was the last time, that sits right behind City Hall, right across the tracks. So I said, you know what? That's a great building. Let's see what we can do with it. We applied for a Delta Regional Authority grant. We got it. The city invested money as well. And all of a sudden, we spent about $500,000 and brought it completely up to speed. And now it is not only our headquarters. I moved from the industrial park into downtown, into this entrepreneurial beehive, if you will. Moved our whole staff there, and guess what? Not a drop-off on the industrial traffic. Turns out nobody cared that my office was not at the industrial park. Nobody cared. And guess what? They cared very much as to where the entrepreneurial development program was, and they wanted it downtown. So that's how we ended up downtown. So probably right now we have about 12, 13 people. I could probably accommodate 20, 21. That use our facility. They pay a modest $75 a month, all the coffee they can drink, all the toilet paper they want to use, whatever, and they come in there whenever they want. I've got one guy who is a freelance writer. He's been doing this for 15 years, and he just wanted to get out of his third bedroom. We've got other people that work for other companies, big companies, that come there. And they might spend 3 hours a day, they might spend 4, they might come in twice a week. You know, everybody's schedule is completely different, but at any given time, we probably have 2 or 3 of them there. But here's another thing that having a space like that will do for you in your community. Got one guy that is a remote worker. He's the national sales director for a company. Makes really good money. We're happy to have him in our community. He's from our community originally. He came back because of family situations, like he's here to help care for his mother. But he came back, and he can still be the national sales director. He just has to hop on a plane about once a month and spend 2 or 3 days in San Diego. So no big deal. He can do that from Madisonville. But turns out he's an avid mountain biker. And he got here, and he's like, man, because we sat down and talked about this one day. He goes, man, I have to drive 3 or 4 hours to really get really good mountain biking. They have some mountain biking at Owensboro, but it's not what I want, blah, 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 blah. I was like, well, James, you know what? Why don't you just do something about that? He's like, you know what? I'm going to do that. So guess what? He started talking to all these national contacts and all this, that, and the other. Finally laid out a plan, went to the mayor. We were able to use some restaurant tax revenues and spent about $300,000 on mountain bike trails. The day that we opened, James had recruited 80 riders from other places to come to Madisonville to ride those mountain bike trails. And you know what? Almost every single one of them has been back at least once since then. And this was in June. We have about 15 or 20 people that ride those mountain bike trails every single day. And you know what? Has anybody ever bought a mountain bike recently? You can buy a motorcycle before you buy a mountain bike. These people are people that have money, they spend money, they go where they want to do, and they want to have fun. And so, but guess what? We would have never even had that unless what? we had a place for the remote worker to come to your community. And I would submit to you, having those kind of people come into your community doesn't just boost jobs and they pay taxes once they get there, but they know how to do stuff. They like to do stuff and they know how to do stuff. They know how to manage a project. James, he's a highly educated person. He's managed projects his whole corporate life. He knows how to manage a project. You come up with the presentation, you identify all the issues, you go and you talk to the funding sources, you do all these things that you got to do to be successful. And I would submit to you, your human capital will grow if you take steps like this. So, we also give them plenty of opportunities to learn. So we have all kinds of learning series that help these entrepreneurs learn how to do things. And then last but not least, of course, we try to connect them to capital sources. I've been doing entrepreneurial development off and on, and you guys, you've seen my bio. I haven't always been an economic developer. I was a banker for a long time, for 16 years actually, and for almost 7 years I was a portfolio manager for a large private family foundation, which is why I appreciate diversification, which is why I love to swing for the fence, but I also like to play small ball, because remember, it's how many, it's not how. And that's why I look at it from the standpoint of we want to balance and do all these different things. But I've done this in 3 different states and 3 different parts of the country. And the problems are the same. People have to figure out who they are, what they can do, and then get about doing those things. So when we saw that this is something that we could get about doing, that's why we structured things this way with our entrepreneurial program and really did what we had to do to boost it and make it successful. The other piece that why I listed capital as the last one on there, I would submit to you the number one reason for business failure is premature scaling. It's not because they couldn't access capital, it's because they accessed it too quickly. You did not nail it before you scaled it. So that's one of the reasons that when somebody comes in talks to us about starting a new business, and immediately they go, oh, well, are there some grants I can access, or are there some incentives or some money? Can you help me put a business plan together so that I can go to the bank and borrow more money, or I can try to raise capital? I was like, no, absolutely not. Number one, you don't even know what you're going to do yet. Number two, you don't even know what you don't know. And that's what always bites you, is what you don't know, you don't know. So we help them go through the entire process. And I do that deliberately because that's how I weed out the imposters. They meet with us, we give them a list of homework. If they come back with that homework in 2 weeks and we start talking about something else and we just keep going and keep going and keep going, I know they're serious, I know they're committed, and maybe we can do something with it. But after you give them homework twice and they don't show up, well, guess what? I don't have to waste my time with that person anymore. And the last thing I wanted to do was take them to meet one of my banker friends, right? So that's one of the reasons that I put capital very last on this. It's not rocket science, it's common sense, believe me, born of hard knocks. So what are some of the things that we do in Hopkins County? So the Innovation Station is what we named our train station, where we do the co-working and the incubation. I'll talk a bit in a moment about Kentucky Movers and Makers. But all the things that you see there, some of those are culture building, some of them are talent recruitment things, and some of them are collision spaces. But all of them contribute to what we do and how we do it. And we are very focused too, I want to say that. We're very focused on the kinds of entrepreneurs that we help bring along as well. I'm a firm believer that your community is only as strong as its weakest link. If you don't have an adequate representation of female entrepreneurs, for example, or minority entrepreneurs, then you're not doing your job. You need to make sure that everybody gets to participate in this economic development game. As a result, and I'm not going to claim personal credit for it, it's just a credit to our community, is we have 151 female entrepreneurs that are operating a business in Hopkins County. I think that's probably, I don't know that that statistic is probably kept statewide, but I bet you we're in the top 5 per capita. And you know why? It's because we care, because we want to give women the opportunity to be successful in the things that they do. So that being said, some of the other things are conferences and events that we do on an annual basis to help proliferate these entrepreneurial development things. I just want to call out a couple of them. One of them is what I call Roots to Riches. We've been doing this for 3 years now. We literally have over 200 people that attend the Roots to Riches conference every year. And what Roots to Riches is to try to foster what I call agropreneurship. We have farmers that come together with people that are trying to do something entrepreneurially that relates to agriculture. And in case you don't know it, the farmer is the consummate entrepreneur, right? So anybody who, you talk about risk takers, right? So they get together, and what we do is make it something meaningful. We work with the Extension Office and say, okay, what are 2 or 3 hot buttons that we ought to have at this conference that'll be interesting for the farmers? And they usually give us 2 or 3 things, and so we line up those topics, and we deal with those. But we also sprinkle in 2 or 3 other things like entrepreneurship. And, you know, here's somebody who's doing a piece of software that will help you do something with your cattle or whatever. And so it just is a great place to mix people that are dedicated to boosting entrepreneurship or starting their own business that relates to agriculture with the people that are actually going to use it. See, there's this thing that's important in entrepreneurship is I can come up with a great product, but unless somebody's willing to buy it, it's just a hobby. So what we're trying to do there is take these people that have something that they can try to sell to customers and provide them with a forum so they can talk to customers. I mean, it's not all that brilliant. The second thing that we also are doing right now, we will be starting this on September 14th. You'll see the emblem down there for Codify. What Codify is going to be doing starting September 14th is teaching software coding at the Innovation Station. They have 20 people in the class. And our goal with that is to create 20 people during the course of a 40-week period, which is how long the 2 courses take. There's a front-end course and a back-end course, is so that we'll have 20 more people by this time next year that know how to software code. They can either A, go into their own business, or B, they can go to work for somebody in the tech world. And guess what? They can probably do it from the Innovation Station because most likely they're going to be getting a software development job that they can work remotely from. So we're pretty excited about that. Plus, it builds skills for the future. Again, hearkening back to some of the things that we've talked about so far today, the jobs that are happening in our communities are jobs that are not as labor intensive as they used to be. In fact, they are getting more and more and more automotive. The aforementioned announcement I told you about from 3 months ago, 51 jobs, $70 million project. The plant manager told me, he said, those 51 people used to walk around this plant with a toolbox. Now they walk around this plant with either a laptop or a phone. I need those kind of skills. So we have to be doing something, even in the entrepreneurial world, that helps prepare people for jobs of the future. And even if they don't stay with their own business, it creates a labor force that we need. So, talking a little bit about the Innovation Station. So, this just explains a little bit about co-working. I don't have to explain that to you what it is, but basically, it just allows people to be in the same area. They're all movable desks. You can put people together. You can separate people. One guy that comes into our place just likes to sit on the couch. He doesn't want to sit at a desk. He just is, and when it's nice weather outside, he'll just sit in the little Adirondack chairs outside and watch the trains go by while he's doing his stuff. It's like, okay. And every time a train goes by, he looks at it like it's the first one he's ever seen. Oh, well, to each his own, right? We're just providing things for people. But this one, the next one, I'm especially proud of. So we created Kentucky Movers and Makers. We opened up last November. What this had to do with was when I talked about collision spaces. The innovation station was great for those people that are working on their laptops and doing things that are less hands-on. But I look at our community demographic, and we are a people in Hopkins County that like to work with their hands. So what can we be doing in Hopkins County to help that person who wants to be an entrepreneur as much as the person who wants to work on his or her laptop? So through hook or crook, we went through the Area Development District, and were able to apply for and get a $1 million grant from the EDA. And we went out and we bought, for less than $200,000, we bought a building that's about 2 blocks from our innovation station. It used to be a feed store back in its history, but for the last 20 years, it had been a moving and storage place, hence the movers and makers, right? So we bought the building, got the grant, renovated it, and bought about almost $200,000 worth of equipment. Everything from metalworking to woodworking to lasers to a plasma cutter. We have embroidery machines. We have all these things. We got 23 pieces of equipment. And people from all walks of life are using it. We're up to 60 members now, and that's just since November. We're pretty pleased with what has happened with that. And the reason I draw your attention to this picture, and those really are actual people working at the Movers and Makers space. The lady that you see here's name is Katie. And why I think this is important, and this is why this sort of dovetails into this entire discussion. What are some of the biggest challenges that we're having when we're trying to put workforce to work in our communities? Childcare, right? Big problem. Katie's got an industrial background, but she knew how to use machines, struggling with childcare issues, but she said, you know what, you've got this laser machine. I want to learn how to use this laser machine. So she joined our Movers and Makers. She got to work learning how to use the laser. She makes all kinds of different crafty kind of things, everything from Christmas ornaments to, just signs that people put in their yards, or not yards, but their houses and things like that. And she sells them online. Well, during the course of the almost year that she's been here, she's probably grossing $2,000 or $3,000 a month, and her material costs are pretty low. So she's literally taking home $2,000 maybe, $2,500 a month. Well, guess what? She doesn't have to have a real job. Her job was just an augmentation to her husband's job, and she wanted to be able to stay home with her kids. And guess what? She can stay home with her kids. She comes into the maker space, probably spends 3 hours on maybe a Tuesday or Wednesday afternoon, and she cranks through all of her stuff. And then she goes home and puts it in her inventory and sells stuff online. I have just described something available to every community in this country. People are smart. We just got to give them an opportunity to do something interesting. Again, I mentioned all the stuff that we have. We even sponsor pop-up shops. Usually once a month. Summer's been a little light, but getting back in the fall when things cool off a little bit, we'll be able to start those up on every 4th Saturday. But everybody who's a maker can actually make stuff and sell it at our pop-up shop. One of the things that I was concerned about with this was, okay, what about sustainability of something like this? Great and good, you got a federal grant to pay for it, but how's it going to sustain itself? Because it has about $85,000 or $90,000 a year worth of fixed expenses, including the guy that we employ to act as our shop manager. Well, between $60, $45 a month memberships, pay it's like a gym membership. You pay $45 a month and you schedule time and you come in and you use stuff. I got one guy that has a fully robust shop. He makes a really good living doing what he does, but he comes just to use our vertical saw because he says, I don't want to spend $5,000 on my vertical saw. You've got one. I can come here. I can spend 3 hours and I can cut all my wood for the week. Why would I want to go buy that? So we've got those kinds of things. But the point I was making with that is, from a sustainability standpoint, I've now got 60 members that are paying $45 a month. We probably make $10,000 or $12,000 a year off of classes. Like, you don't even have to be a member, but if I want to learn how to make a Christmas ornament, if I want to learn how to use the CNC router, if I want to learn how to use the plasma cutter, I pay a $25 fee and I attend that 3-hour class. So we make about $12,000 off of the classes. And then I was lacking about $20,000. I really want to get this to 100 members, and I think we'll be there by January. But I was lacking about $20,000 worth to make sure that I was sustainable. So I talked to a local couple who have a coffee truck. And I said, have you ever considered, and they do great. They probably make $35,000 a month through that coffee truck. It's incredible. It truly is. And I said, you guys ever thought about just having a fixed location too? He's like, yeah, but this and that and the other. And then he came back about 30 days later and he said, I've got it. He said, what I'm going to do, he's from, as am I, East Tennessee. And he's like, you know how you go to Gatlinburg and you see the candy made and all that kind of stuff? What if I do something there that would be roasting the coffee as well as just serving coffee drinks? And I said, yeah, that kind of keeps in keeping with the maker theme. So that's what they decided to do. And so now it took about 2 months to get all the construction changes, but in our big open area where we had some of the classroom, I literally carved out about 1/3 of the classroom space and converted it to coffee shop space. And I get a % of his revenues, and within the next 6 months we'll be to that $20,000 a year figure to meet our sustainability. So the reason that's important is you can't have these things and not have them be sustainable over time. But for every person that comes in there and gets a cup of coffee every day or eats a bagel every morning is a potential member. And you know what? We end up doing a tour a day from people that come in there. And we've probably gotten 5. We're averaging 1 or 2 members a week that come into the coffee shop and didn't even know we existed. So it's just one of those things that's important. We also know that this is important that we be part of the community as well, and we're trying to groom children to love to work with their hands as well. So this is a group of young people that are part of a local after-school program that came, and one of our volunteers, Ed, that you see there with the T-shirt that says, "I turn wood into things, what's your superpower?" He and 2 other people helped all these young people create their own little flower box with their name on it that they could take home to their families and brag about what they made with their own hands. And so the more we do with that, the more young people in our community we're going to train that it's a cool thing to work with your hands, and it's something that is meaningful. So we just offer a lot of different services through what we do. I'm not going to read those off to you. We also help when people are trying to start businesses. We walk them through the whole regulatory piece of it too and help make sure that they're staying in compliance and all of those things. It's amazing too from an entrepreneurial library standpoint too. If you write letters or make phone calls or send emails to publishers and tell them how you're just this poor little 501c3 and that you're all dedicated to entrepreneurs, can you please send me a copy of your book free of charge? And they send you 15. So we've got this entire library that we give books away to entrepreneurs about things that relate to being a good entrepreneur. And then lastly, we're connected with what Kentucky Innovation, which is a an adjunct of the Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development, focused on innovations. We formed with Murray State, so Chris is on the committee as well. People all over Western Kentucky, mainly the hubs are in Murray, Madisonville, and Paducah, but we formed up with all these groups, and we connect with Kentucky Innovation primarily to help tech entrepreneurs, but it's about anything related to tech. So it could be even somebody that's looking to start a business that is just going to add technology to that existing business. We can help them, and there's actually some money that comes with it from the Commonwealth of Kentucky to help us do these things. So that's a valid use of our time as well. And its goals at Grow West are to do three things. One is to get more and better innovation-driven entrepreneurs, to facilitate the growth of technology, especially in Western Kentucky, and to assist entrepreneurs in growing their businesses. So it's a really great program, and we're happy to be a part of it. So I'll leave you with these 5 things, with all that I've just said, if you could condense them to 5 things as to why this should matter to you. And that is, number 1, you don't need to turn your back on 35 jobs a year. Number 2, it's probably the most cost-efficient economic development activity that you can participate in. It does attract talent. And again, I mentioned the fact that sometimes people don't make a successful business, but then they become better employees for you and more higher quality employee for you. It works hand in hand with business retention and expansion and your attraction elements. To tell your story, as John mentioned before, telling your story to potential projects that might come to your community, when you can say to them, you know what, we've got this maker space that people can literally come and learn how to use a CNC machine at our maker space, and they can practice on it after hours. And oh, by the way, everybody that works for you can do this, and they'll have fun doing it. And last but not least, is it's really just fun. You get to meet a lot of interesting people, you get to participate in something that's meaningful in the community, and you get to have fun while you're doing it. So I will leave you with that, and certainly I think I got about 15 minutes left. If you would like to ask any questions, be happy to entertain those.
Questions for Ray? Ray, I made a couple notes here. So, one of the things that I've seen in economic development, and it's back to what we talked about at the very beginning, economic development is everything, right? Everybody has a role to play with a various different facet of making the community great from an economic development standpoint. So this is a very important facet of that for the reasons that you mentioned at the very onset. Entrepreneurs and small businesses are grown in this community. They're not going to try to negotiate with you for the risk of maybe moving someplace else, right? All you got to do is make sure you take care of them and you foster their growth. So I think that's an important element of what you said. The other thing that I've seen, and it's both with workforce development and small business development, is there are so many programs out there. For the entrepreneur, it can be confusing and overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And so I think the things that you all are doing to create a network for entrepreneurs to foster and mentor and help each other, helps them find more programs, helps them find, new outlets of, support and mentorship and so forth. So I think that's another really, really important facet. And so if you're sitting in the audience today and you're thinking, this entrepreneurship space is really where I belong, think about how you can work within this community, continue to create and build networks and ways where they can interact, right?
Right. And I think one of the things that you hit on, John, and thanks for sort of tying that together, is again, this is only a piece of the puzzle, right? It's a holistic thing with your other aspects of economic development. And the reason I say that is we literally about 2 years ago had an entrepreneur come to us and say, look, here's what I want to do over here, but I'm smart enough to know I got to pay the bills right now. And I need to find a job that maybe is second shift or something like that, well, I can do these sorts of things. Where can I go that's a one-stop shop that I can find where all these jobs that you keep talking about that are available, where are they? So we literally sat down and created a website that is a one-stop shop. It's hopkinscokyjobs.com. And I promise you, anytime, at any given time, it's got 500 or 600 available jobs on it that anybody from anywhere can go, and it's a single point of contact. And sometimes that's all you need in your community too. You've got jobs that you need to fill. Well, maybe, believe it or not, people don't even get the newspaper sometimes anymore. They don't even know where to look for stuff. Oh, I heard about the job, but I heard there's jobs, but I don't know where to get them. Well, guess what? We've got a website, and every single person with a computer can go to that website. And how did that website come about? Because we had an entrepreneur come and say, where can I get a part-time job?
The other thing that I want to make sure and highlight, and then we're going to let you guys get lunch while Casey sets up his presentation, and we'll keep rolling through, is how important relationships are in economic development, right? You know, we talked about having ambassadors for your community that create and build relationships within the community and with external partners. And I think for entrepreneurs, the relationships that they have with each other or with funding institutions or programs or what have you is ultimately the most important thing. My dad is a small business owner, and if it weren't for his relationship with a banker to understand how he could get that first business loan, he would have never started his operation. So sometimes comfort level with who am I comfortable calling, and it doesn't have to be, you know, one single person that they call. A network like this provides them comfort in approaching someone about something like getting that small business loan or finding a program that helps support them, because it's an anxious situation. If you're putting your life and your savings on the line to start a business and you're not comfortable with approaching somebody with that kind of notion, it may not happen, right? So you want to provide comfort in those relationships.
And every single one of your big, to mention relationships, every single one of your big companies that are big employers in town, whether it's your hospital or whether it's a Carhartt, whether it's a GE or Berry Plastics, whoever, every single one of those big businesses is a potential customer for your entrepreneurs. We have one guy that we helped launch that has a full-time job now because all he does is drive trucks that he picks up at Carhartt and he takes it to a warehouse down in Memphis. And he does it back and forth every day. And that all came about because we were able to connect him to the right people. So the relationships are critical.
Yeah. Any final questions for Ray? Go ahead. Yep.
Yeah. Ray, I just wanted to say I love what you said coming out of the gate on this, that it's about creating a culture of innovation. That's awesome, because not only do you see coming out of that those 35 jobs you create, but there are other things not even measurable of those impacts of innovation that people contribute to the community they're in. Second of all, I like the way that you have these different types of engagement that you mix together: the makers, the caffeinate, the codified, etc. Good ways of bringing people together, so there are ways to spontaneously mix from different perspectives, different types of talents mixing together. So also wanted to mention that from one ecosystem builder to another, my wife Andrea and I have been in this space for a while now. We are just starting out with an initiative sponsored by Center College called Center Works. Most people just know about it already, but one thing that we're coming out of the gate with is a program called Liftoff. We invite entrepreneurs from the 7-county region here to participate in it. We're able to offer that right now at no cost, and what we do in that is help entrepreneurs find their value proposition. We do that through a process we take them through for innovation. So we help them, and as you were mentioning, you didn't want to take those entrepreneurs to the funders right away. This is all about getting them on solid ground first.
Yep.
And introducing them to the resourcing region so they can build.
Exactly. And I think what's good about, and I was aware of you guys because of our Kentucky Innovation, connection as well. I'd heard of you guys before, and bravo on standing it up. But what you also are bringing to the table is a different perspective on what successful entrepreneurship is too, where one entrepreneur, if he's a truck driver, it's all about the revenue-driven stuff, right? Well, you might encounter maybe a more tech-driven type entrepreneur whose real objective is not to get to revenue positive. His real objective is to get to the A round or the B round and create the milestones that are impressive enough that he or she can sell themselves to a Microsoft or whoever, right? They don't even need to get to revenue positive. I mean, how do you think a lot of these young people that you see on the slides actually made their money? They made their money not because they got to revenue positive, but they came up with something really unique that was a kernel of a product or a service that was in big demand by a large tech company. And so they bought them before they were revenue positive, and that's how you end up with these 28-year-old millionaires. So you're bringing that perspective too that shows, look, this is a way to do it too. And that's what we really want all of our rural communities to respect.
Right. That's definitely one avenue that is an option. Tech entrepreneurs from this area could go down, but it's when we're trying to promote this breadth of diversity, whether they're small farms, whether we're agriculture or food producers, or whatever they might be. We have a bookstore that does children's books.
Sure. Fantastic. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks for the comment. You had one over here, I think, sir.
For your comment, if you have a relationship with Madisonville Community and Technical College, what is that relationship?
Actually, if I had to pick one professional friend in Hopkins County that is closest to me, it is our community college president. She and I came to the area about the same time, and we both are hillbillies. She came from West Virginia, I came from Tennessee, so we had that in common. We were outsiders, and we knew that change was necessary. And she brought a completely new perspective, very entrepreneurial in her pursuit. In fact, I'm glad you brought that up because we got to work, and this is in terms of investing in the long term of your community, and I know Todd Block's going to be talking here later on. But about 3.5 years ago, she and I sat across the table and I said, look, I'm going to tell you right now, if we can get to a point in Madisonville where we could do air logistics in the area, we would be a whole lot more successful because we're in a perfect logistics location already. Looked at our assets that we had. Our Madisonville Airport has a 6,000-foot runway, et cetera, but I said, what you got to do, because I've got an Air Force background, and what you got to do in order to be successful is you've definitely got to have all the services available. You know, you can't just go out there and build a bunch of warehouses and say, okay, I want to do air logistics. And you can't just go out there and build a whole infrastructure of services and maintenance, repair, and overhaul facilities and all that stuff. You got to get the operations up and running first. And we're not going to get there from here if we're just going to be relying on general aviation. We're just not going to do it. So what's the best way that we can drive operations? How about a flight school? So we embarked on, we have the first community college-based, I know there's a four-year college-based program at EKU, but we have the first community college-based aviation program in Kentucky. And a young person, and in 2 years, either helicopter or fixed wing, can gain all 5 certifications to become an instructor pilot, which they'll get paid $30 an hour while they're getting their hours over the next couple of years. And then after that, they can go to work for the airlines or whatever they're going to do and make a lot of money. But we generated enough, and we got 17 people. We just started it this fall, and we have 17 people in the program now. And we're close enough to Fort Campbell that we believe we can recruit veterans there to take advantage of their benefits in order to be in flight school as well. So we're really hoping we'll be there in 2 years. It will be at 50 to 75 people a year that are going through the program. That's huge for Madisonville, Kentucky. the operations of, 150, 200 operations a day, takeoff and landing. Well, guess what? Now it makes sense to have all this maintenance and repair stood up. But it took us 3.5 years to get it done because, with any apologies to anybody that's in the community college business here, trying to get new things done at KCTCS, it's kind of a glacial pace. So we just had to be, and I'm sorry to anybody, I hope I didn't offend anybody, but seriously, it was hard, and it took a long time, but we finally got it done. But yes, absolutely 100%, you've got to have economic development and the community college joined at the hip, 100%.
What I take away from what you guys were just talking about is that economic developers ourselves have to be entrepreneurial and have to be innovative and have to be curious to come up with new programs and new ways to attract things based on what community strategy is. So that's a perfect example of that, Ray.
Yeah. Well, one of the guys came to us, entrepreneur guys came to us and goes, look, I'm getting into this helicopter program that they now got with community college. And whenever I finally get my certifications and I can start my own business, I'm going to start a business crop dusting with a helicopter. It's done. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's done. And I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. But those guys you see pulling a trailer with a helicopter on it, they're doing pretty well.
Yeah.
So, good stuff.
Ray, thanks for your
Thank you all.
presentation. Really
Appreciate
nice
it.
job.